they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our news site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Hello and welcome to the Foreign Policy Review, a Parrot TV program. I'm Dustin Pickering, you know me, and Carlo Parcelli, Ben Toth, and Billy Bob are co-hosting with me today on this show. I think we're going to ground our discussion in the indeterminacy of history. We have a guest who has not arrived yet, Matt Ehret. He should be here hopefully within the next few minutes. We can just kind of do a general discussion. What do you guys think of this? We were just discussing this. Well, maybe we can just reopen this discussion of quantum physics and its relation to history. So what about Carlo? What do you want to say about that?
Well, I wanted to avoid having a conversation about it because it's primarily a metaphorical relationship.
Right.
It has no, it's poetic. So I think that's why you brought it up. But I found it interesting. I found Matthew, our guest today's conversation with a radio host, interesting because the notion of the uncertainty principle came up. I was trying to call up the German version of it, unbestimmt something, but and Kurt Hebner, the philosopher of science, says that indeterminacy relation is a more accurate term, and it's interesting because Matthew uses that title in one of his books. The word indeterminacy. I was just trying to make a kind of a metaphorical relationship between what's called the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen relation paradox or experiment, and that's the action at a distance. It's one of the more famous of the many. I understand there's a 12th series of paradoxes that have just been introduced, which I don't want to read about, frankly, but I read a little bit about them. I can't talk about them right now, but Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen is very famous. Action at a distance, two entities light years apart, many light years apart, can exchange information instantaneously. How does that happen? And the paradox comes in because, as Niels Bohr said, he's concerned about visualization within the sciences. That is, if you can't visualize what's actually happening in the phenomenon, how do you know it's true? And you have only the mathematics to rely on. So I related that to Matthew's conversation about distant historical conditions influencing current historical conditions, and he was giving that interpretation to counter what he called the materialist historians, that the people who generally see it as history being a direct cause and effect. And the example he gave was people go look the reason for World War I was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, and of course Matthew pointed out that there are other I can't remember his example now, I'm sorry, but there are other aspects that also fed into that the beginning of World War I and so on and so forth. And it's a metaphorical construct. It's something that you or I might use in a poem, but certainly no.
Right. Or Ezra Pound, as we were talking before, used kind of juxtapose the American Revolution with Chinese history, and it's like it's very interesting because that presents history as a kind of holistic thing in a way. It's not disunited by cause and effect so much. It's like it's an entire body, almost like of thought, in which this event in, like, I don't know, let's just say 1812 can still affect history throughout. It can leave its reverberations throughout.
Yeah, and he gave some very good examples.
Yeah,
I mean, British history, Palmerston. He went all the way back to the Elizabeth and her spy ring, and and
Interesting.
I've written
his thoughts on
a dialogue between Christopher Marlowe and Giordano Bruno, and they were both apparently in the Elizabethan court. And Marlowe, rather recklessly, he was a reckless person, put Bruno's life at risk by more or less exposing him to Cecil, who was William Cecil, I think it's William, who was Elizabeth's main spy, the head of the spy agency. But anyway, that it's a metaphorical thing.
right.
I've never, it'd be like going back to the days in physics back in the 70s where people were writing really stupid books about quantum physics, like Tao of physics and dancing with masters and that idiocy, and it really took root. It's like you couldn't get it out of people's heads.
So it contrasts.
Go ahead, Billy Bob.
It contrasts with the materialist view, right? It's I don't know if it's complementary. It kind of is in opposition to a little bit. It's a different,
very interesting perspective. It sounds fascinating to me. I mean, I'm interested in different, I guess you could call it ideological constructions of viewing things, and this sounds like a lot, sort of like a contrast to a lot of what's out there already.
Interesting. I mean, I just want to jump in because Marxists, like us, we view history through the lens of dialectic materialism. And I think that's not the same as what Carlo was talking about when he said materialist historians who see the execution of Archduke Ferdinand led to all the events. That's very different because for us, the material conditions between the numerous little empirical empire clubs who once already divided up the world and were in conflict, that was already there. Even without the execution of Archduke Ferdinand, another event would have happened, it was already basically a tinderbox ready for war. So I think that's very different from what was called materialist history.
Yeah, very much so. And I like to blame everything on the positivists. So so I think I would call it a more positive. The condition that Matthew was speaking against is essentially an offspring of positivism. And if you're really that heinous about it, logical positivism, which is really, I mean, more inhuman and idiotic than pretty much any other expression I've encountered in my long, bitter life.
So I think to kind of jump into this video, I think we could talk a little bit about this video of Arestovich and his comments on Russian aggression, because I think this kind of what applies. I mean, it's very he has this perspective, from the beginning of like what's going to happen if this isn't deterred. So if NATO expansion, if Ukraine joins with NATO, this is what will happen, and he goes to a T of what Russia is going to do in 2019. I'll let Billy Bob kind of introduce the video if he wants.
Yeah, Bob.
It's 2019. He's being interviewed by another Ukrainian, and so they're speaking in Ukrainian. There's subtitles, and he speaks very quickly, and the subtitles don't last very long. So you got to really pay attention. But it's very prophetic what he says. It's about a minute and a half long. But yeah, we can discuss it after if you want to play it, and then we can.
Give me just a second. I'll get this up here, and I'm going to put this on full screen mode. Okay.
Oh, yeah, then you can pause it when we want you to pause it.
Okay, I'm going to play now.
То есть официально получают подачу НАТО, то тогда мы можем говорить о каких-то сроках прекращения войны.
Нет, ни о каких сроках прекращения войны мы не будем говорить. Наоборот, это, скорее всего, подногнет крупная военная операция России против Украины. Потому что они нас будут просадить в инфраструктурном отношении и превратить здесь в разваленную территорию, для которой у нас неохотно.
То есть Россия сможет пойти на прямую конфронтацию с НАТО?
Конечно, Россия не НАТО. Они должны это сделать до того, как наступит НАТО, чтобы мы не были интересны НАТО. Перестали быть интересна разваленная территория. С вероятностью 99,9% наша цена за вступление в НАТО – это большая война с Россией. А если не вступим в НАТО, это поглощение России в течение 10-12 лет. Вот и вся вилка, в которой мы находимся. А теперь давайте выбирать федерацию.
Подождите, если поставить чашу на весах, а что лучше в таком случае?
Конечно, крупная война с Россией, переход в НАТО по результатам победы над Россией.
Что может быть крупная война с Россией?
Вот воздушная операция, наступательное вторжение российских армий, 4, которые заданы на наших границах, там, осада Киева, попытка окружить войска, которые потом находятся с операцией Минского прорыва через Крымский перешейк на Новогорское водохранилище Жукудовка, наступление с территории Беларуси, создание новых народных республик, диверсии, удары по объектам критической инфраструктуры и так далее. Воздушный десант. Вот что такое полноценная война. И вероятность ее 99%.
А когда?
21, 22 самый критический, 20-22 самый критический часов.
Если Украина получает да, мы можем о каких...
Pause.
That's prophetic, isn't it?
Yes.
So
Very
this is
pathetic.
Quite prophetic.
2019.
I think we lost
3
Billy
years.
Bob, though.
Yeah, I saw him drop out. I wonder if some.
Maybe he'll probably come back. I think we're here. He is. He's back. Okay, so since
Sorry
Billy
about
Bob
that.
sort of brought this video to me and to my attention, I'd like him to kind of give us a little bit of a rundown on
Before
what he.
Can I drop a joke? Because this is the first time I saw him in proper quality, and I can't believe I haven't seen this before. But doesn't he look like, a bit like, you know, Birdman Michael Keaton? For me,
Yes, he does.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Over to you, Billy Bob.
So yeah, a Michael Keaton lookalike, perhaps. So it was interesting, you know, what he was explaining. So that was in 2019. It was during the they called it a war. They're like, you know, there's this war going on. Are we going to see an end to this war? And so they're talking about, you know, the war against the Donbass. So the you know, the separatists versus the Ukrainian forces. And so what was the first thing he says? He says, you know, she asks, is that going to end the war? You know, bringing NATO in. I think that's what she asked. But yes, was here. So
Yeah, the thing I thought was most interesting is that, you know, he brings that up and he says, you know, if the outcome is a victory over Russia, you know, that point was like really interesting, you know, because they asked what would be the optimal you know, the optimal strategy is, and he said a victory over Russia and joining NATO, and that was like that's just and something of that nature. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, victory over Russia before joining NATO.
Right.
That was specifically before.
And
joining
then
NATO.
and he said, you know, if Russia would completely level Ukraine, then NATO wouldn't want anything to do with Ukraine at that point.
Again, prophetic, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. If you have anything else to say, Billy Bob, feel free to jump in.
yeah, so you know, I'm being distracted here because our guest is emailing me. Apparently, he was having issues with the platform and getting on the platform. So so that's disappointing. We can definitely reschedule.
We'll schedule him. Yeah, we'll
yeah.
we'll try to bring him back on another time. But we can keep a discussion going. I think
Yeah.
we can just continue to, you know, indeterminacy of three, Ukraine, Russia,
Well-
whatever subject comes to mind. Let's just free flow it.
Yeah, I had some more on that video. I mean, essentially, he's saying that we have two options. In 10 or 12 years, either, you know, Ukrainian will be totally controlled by Russia, or we can win a war against Russia, and that's going to be the best option. So essentially, in 2019, he was advocating everybody, you know, that our best shot here is to get into a large-scale conflict with Russia and win. And that was what he was, you know, optimistic about in 2019.
Well,
So
2019 is a key year because the war has been going on for 5 years at that point. And if you remember, at 2014 or 15, when Minsk II was signed, then the Kiev regime was surrounded in the Donbass, ready to be destroyed. And that's why they signed those accords. And this was 5 years of building up that army. So I think he looked at the army, and thought maybe we've got a good chance. Maybe we can be victorious. Yeah. Obviously, falsely, but he was in that frame of mind.
Because we know now that the Minsk 1 and 2 was just about buying time to build up their war machine to get to become a de facto NATO military power, and so they were optimistic that Russia they were going to be able to win.
Yeah. Sorry, Carlo.
No, that's all right. I just wanted to say I would contest one thing he said, and not directly, but NATO's basically a security alliance. But as far as, Ukraine is in the process of being completely destroyed, and that's that has attracted Cargill, who's not only shipping the grain out, but they want to buy Ukrainian farmland, and I think are in the process of doing it. And of course, BlackRock has just signed an agreement to basically rebuild the country. So the vultures are there. The vultures are still there. They're not there in the context of NATO, because NATO is really not a development. They're no more a developmental entity, even linked with the IMF and the World Bank, which is the biggest hustle in the world, than AFRICOM is. So that aspect, the rubble still has value to the West, is all I wanted to say.
I was going to say, just on the topic of vultures, I recently discovered, I think I read about this yesterday, that I'm not surprised that Sean Penn has become the most Ukraine-oriented performer in the world, introducing Zelensky at the Golden Globes, because he's got this NGO, and it's called, I'm just going to find it, it's called CORE, and you can find it. He's the head of it, and it's deeply invested and involved in, NGO-style aid, of course, to Ukraine. So he's got his tentacles in there as well, as one of the vultures. Not at the scale of BlackRock, obviously, and partners, but it's another small connection.
Yeah.
There's one more aspect to that video which I don't quite understand. So he mentions in one sentence, he's like, vote for Zelensky. So I'm assuming in 2019, was Poroshenko still in power in 2019? Were they just about to have the election? I don't recall. But it seems clear from the context of what he's saying that in 2019 there was some kind of a vote, that Zelensky was up for some kind of a vote. But what confuses me is Zelensky definitely did not run on a platform of, hey, we're going to have a full-blown war with Russia. He ran on a platform of implementing Minsk and having improved relations with Russia. So to me, I have some questions for Arestovich, because I don't quite understand exactly what he's saying, because he definitely says vote for Zelensky in that minute and a half clip. And then he goes on to say that, winning a war with Russia is our best option, which just seems counterintuitive so there might have been more to that clip that, a better context to that clip that it would help make more sense. But
you're right about it. You're right about his election program. Sorry, I don't know when to. There's a small delay. Election program running on peace, not just with Russia, but the Russian speakers in the Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk, of having restored relations and reining in the Azov, the Aidar, and these kinds of people. He ran on that program, and that didn't quite turn out the way he advertised it. But
yeah,
interesting that Arestovich said this on the air during the year of the election, I suppose. I recently saw something with Zelensky. I don't know which one it was, but he says he's been in office for 3 years. So that matches. That tracks.
Yeah, I think that was when he was up for election. And again, he was running against Poroshenko, who had like a less than 10% favorability rating. He was
very unpopular.
He was despised.
Yeah. I want to just say something so that we can remain shadow banned. And that is that Zelensky's history in office demonstrates to me the power of the Nazis in Ukraine. They control the whole narrative. And I want, if I could address the Ukraine people directly, I would say, take the weapons we're giving you and kill the Nazis. And then we can have peace. Just kill them. There are not that many of them.
Or wait for the Russians.
In the tens of thousands. There used to be 42 or 44 million people in Ukraine, and there's still 35 million there or something like that. Kill these motherfuckers. They're destroying your country. And, you know, and where's Europe? Why isn't Europe in there killing these Nazis? What the fuck is wrong with you people? You just had to deal with them in my living fucking memory. You dumbasses, get off your fucking asses and kill the Nazis. That's the key. That's the key to peace. Kill them. I don't care how you do it.
It shows, though, there's a relationship. There's a tight relationship between the State Department and the Nazis. I mean,
it goes back to Allen Dulles and after World War II and Operation Paperclip and all this other Reinhard Gehlen and Mengele in South America. I mean, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been nurturing Ukrainian Nazis since 1944, 45.
That's what Doug Valentine is documented in this book sitting right next to me here.
Luckily, Stepan Bandera couldn't get away. The KGB got that guy, so he didn't get out. But a lot of his ilk, unfortunately, did.
Yes.
But that's what the Russians are doing, what you're suggesting.
I hope they succeed with extreme prejudice.
That's where I'm afraid to say things on YouTube, but
we're already not getting the hits we deserve. So what's the point? You know,
it looks like Russia's doing a pretty good job. You know, they took Soledar and they're encircling Bakhmut. So
yes,
you know, it looks like they're definitely making progress as they're, you know, denazifying Ukraine. It's not as quick progress as people would like to see, but it's, you know, it's effective.
Absolutely, it is. And if you had the time yesterday, I think I watched a 3-hour Q&A session, like a press conference with Sergei Lavrov, Foreign Minister of Russia, where he had a lot to say, very assertively, very calmly. I see the same confidence in him as I do in Putin recent days, but he framed it perfectly, and it drew some condemnation from Western sources, because he said it's exactly the same as the Napoleonic Wars, and then Adolfo, the Austrian painter, and basically it's the West's third attempt at a final solution about Russians. I mean, I'm not sure I would have used those words, but from his point of view, he's exactly right. And right now, everybody's playing the you send weapons first. No, you send tanks first. No, you send tanks first. And, you know, Washington sitting back saying, you do it, Europe. And everybody's ganging up on Germany. Now, if those German tanks enter Russia, just imagine the genetic memory of the Russians seeing that Iron Cross again. That would be a terrible mistake, a terrible historic mistake.
Yeah, and Germany's saying once those Abrams go in, we'll send our Leopards.
Yeah, but those Abrams are not going. Not yet. Not today.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, yeah, those are bad optics, and that would be a real problem. I mean, it wouldn't strategically, it wouldn't be a problem for Russia to deal with that, but it would definitely
for Germany.
Yeah,
for Germany, it would be bad news.
Yeah, I have to trust in Alexander McCors's daily reports and Brian Berletic and other people like that, Moon of Alabama, people like that, because I don't know, and I'm an impatient person by nature, and the way that Russia is waging this war is, for me, it's like I'm grinding my teeth every day.
Frustrating,
but I have to basically have to concede that I don't know enough to really discuss what's happening on the ground. I mean, even if I had the facts, I probably wouldn't be able to address them in any meaningful way, because I would probably be, if I were ever in combat, I probably would last 5 minutes. You know,
none of us have access to the general staff in the Kremlin, so we don't know their plans. But the same frustration you feel, that's present in Russian public opinion. I know that much. That right now they're past all their previous, I guess, bad persuasions. And okay, let's go, but let's get it done. In the name of my granddad, let's just get it done and over with. That is very broad perspective in the Russian state, the patriotic ones,
Yeah.
So that reminds me, I read yesterday, or I heard yesterday, who was saying it? I forget. But Putin does have a big speech today, right?
I read that too, but it was on the English, like Daily Mail or something. So I took it with a pinch of salt. I'm waiting for that speech very much.
And somebody was it was their belief that he would, he was going to have a big announcement, and it was going to be about a new large-scale operation, offensive kind of thing. So that was definitely some speculation I saw yesterday. But yeah, I can't independently confirm that any of that's true, but some people were definitely hoping that he would be announcing some more aggressive action to to put an end to the conflict.
Yeah,
but we'll have to wait and see what happens with that.
Well, we want to move on to another topic? I can throw one out.
Go for it.
Let's talk a little bit about Brazil and what's happened recently in the transition of power to Lula. I'd like to couch it in this. I mean, I did read an article this morning that was actually it was an interview with Black Agenda Report people. I can't remember her name offhand, and the person she was talking to, I can't remember his name either. I don't want to take the time to call it up, but he was. I wait for people to come to the logical conclusion that Washington is behind all of this, and that all it takes is looking at what they did to Lula last time with car wash and Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice lawyers feeding Moro, Alberto, I think whatever his name is, first name is Alberto, whatever the head district attorney or whatever his status is in Brazil, feeding him ways of going about railroading Lula out of his rightful presidency and ability to run, and then doing the same thing to Dilma Rudolph. I didn't get her name right, but I mean, there's a long history. The only other left-wing president that Brazil has had is Goulart, and the United States overthrew him in 1965-66 in a coup. And it's very clear now that the U.S. was involved in this coup. All the information's out. It's as out as much as the information on Chile is available, or any other Congo and the murder of Lumumba. It's all out there. So why people can't just go, look, let's face it, when Blinken comes out in favor of Lula's ascendancy to the presidency, he speaks with forked tongue. It's like, well, we can take it back to plague-ridden blankets from the colonialist, whatever. It's a lock. And why people can't speak of it from that context, journalists or anyone in a position of some authority that knows a little bit about history, is beyond me. Why so many people have to kind of pussyfoot around. We don't know who it is. Lula's he's arrested several merchants in the area. You think this was a merchant run thing? I mean, come on, give me a break. I mean, Bolsonaro.
We'll take a brief break, but we'll come back with some more thoughts from Carlo and enjoy this commercial break. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer. This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely convince you. Welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I invite you to subscribe to our channel if you have not already. And feel free to leave comments, questions, get involved in our discussion. If you have something to say, drop a line in the comments. So, Carlo, would you like to continue your rambling?
Yeah, it gave me a chance to try to look up this quote I wanted to cite from the article.
Okay.
All right, well, let me just read this a little bit here. There are already repercussions. Brasilia, the space age, mid-century. No, that's not it. Let me just say that there's ample evidence that elements from the Brazilian right had been meeting here in Washington with the officials from the Biden administration and the U.S. State Department. That's very clear. I just wanted to. So.
Ben, did you want to address that issue? I have a few things to say, but you can definitely go.
Unless you want to, I'll jump in, because for me, this is why I avoided writing about Brasilia, the riots, basically, because January 6th happened in the USA, and this was basically January 9th, I think, in Brazil, the riots, the destruction of culture, 100 years of paintings. So the US had by reflex, they had to condemn it and say, hooray for democracy. A lot of people around the world, they had to do this. I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as you. Let me put it this way. Bolsonaro, he is basically what they call a proto-fascist. Not Orban Viktor, but this guy, very much that military type. And he got along with Trump famously, but mostly along these cultural lines. And then Biden hated his guts. But he's a sellout for big cash. He always has been, but he also didn't abandon BRICS. So it's not black and white to me. As for Lula, he was released from prison. You know, he didn't fight his way out or anything. And since he's been in power, this happened. And from what I read, I'm not sure I can say I cited unprepared somewhere on the SACA, or maybe the other one, but the SACA, I think, that these people who you referenced, like who meet up in Washington or Florida, wherever Bolsonaro is, these foreign-controlled right-wing forces, a lot of them are in the government and in the military with him. I think he has a very limited space to move. I mean, I haven't seen, I'm with Lula, have been for many years. I haven't seen a program of let's nationalize all our resources and let's get back to the basics of building up our industry and go to loan. And don't forget the big bad boy, the Yanks, the US is just there to the north. And Russia, China, Iran, the strong alternative, the other pole in the multipolar world, are very far away. So I have a feeling, this is speculation, warning, that there's a shift, I think, in US foreign policy, especially in Latin America, because there's a lot of what other people would call woke stuff, there's LGBT stuff, all that human rights jargon, but I don't see what we classical communists would call a socialist program. You know, I'm with Lula, but with caution. And the same goes for Gustavo Petro and people like him. So it's gray and gray for me, not so much black and white. Yeah. As for U.S. involvement, yeah, I'm certain of it. It's too close not to be.
I think when I think of Lula, I think of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas in Mexico, who for 4 consecutive presidential elections was thwarted by the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Department, U.S. State Department. I mean, he clearly would have. Lula's in the mold of Cárdenas, and Cárdenas would have clearly won all 4 of the elections he ran in or almost ran in because he was denied being on the ballot. And Lula's kind of broken through in Brazil for me. So yes, there's he has to be cautious. I mean, obviously the U.S. is not through with you can see what's happening in Peru. They're
I'm
not
just
through
saying,
with
within his government, he has to be very careful.
Yes, they're not through with turning it back, turning time backwards and to this serfdom, no matter what the tide is like. And I mean, they just indicted and convicted the vice president of Argentina, Kirchner, who used to be president.
Those are the 2 big nations, the 2 big economies of South America.
Exactly. So the U.S. is still at work in Latin America trying to re-enslave or continue the enslavement in many cases.
That's without a doubt, that's true, Carlo. I have no doubts about that. But I was very surprised when the State Department and Joe Biden himself really denounced the the efforts on January 9th, the rioters, protesters who were protesting against Lula in favor of Bolsonaro. Yeah, I was surprised that the State Department and Biden came out so aggressively against them. That was surprising to me. But I think it could be understood, like Ben was saying, how Bolsonaro and Trump were a little bit too close, and that makes the Democrats, the Biden establishment, not really that supportive of Bolsonaro. And also, I think, like Ben was also saying, Lula's not that radical. He's not that big of a threat to the interests of the United States.
I'm sorry to say that, but yeah.
And with what's going on in Argentina, the State Department is managing South America, and they'll be okay with Lula in power. It's not an issue that they have to really get crazy and force him out. They can live with him. So I think that explains it. I think it's gray. So the question is, to what extent was the State Department, was the CIA involved in that January 9th uprising in the attempted coup? It's an open question. Is there that big of a split within the CIA? Do they have a pro-Trump faction that's still out there trying to help, or can it be understood as being more organic and really a domestic thing and not really being pushed by the U.S.?
I'll add one more aspect, but Carlo first. Carlo.
Okay, we have to understand the levels we're talking about here. Steve Bannon was very influential with Bolsonaro and the whole movement there. Brasilia is primarily, its population is made up of evangelical Christians who are allied with Bannon. Okay, these are the kind of things that Lula's working against. I just want to add that the interview I'm talking about is Margaret Kimberly talking to Brian Meyer. But we have to talk. Bannon is so much closer to U.S. intelligence than we are, because he's operating at a level where he's getting Mercer money. He's getting millions and millions of dollars, and that's what interests U.S. intelligence. The people with real power, not us. So Bannon's in contact with the CIA every day. They're the same people, essentially. They're the people we're up against. There's no division there. Now, it's interesting because in this article, Ben's argument is made that Bolsonaro's closeness to Trump and is what caused him to partially, his downfall or something.
It's detrimental.
At least you would expect U.S. intelligence to work against someone who was allied to Trump, because it seems like the U.S. intelligence is working against Trump. But when you think about it, the U.S. intelligence is working against Trump because they love DeSantis. Trump was their Mussolini, strutting around, throwing his chin out. DeSantis is their Hitler. And they love DeSantis for that reason. and the U.S. intelligence is working with DeSantis, and they don't need to worry about Trump. He's basically become, you know, yesterday's news. So we can't think about it at those kind of levels, because all these people in this power structure, they talk to each other, they know each other. It's a given.
You've introduced
a lot more powerful than people. And Dustin and I have talked about this. Bannon's a lot more powerful. He has completely co-opted the rhetoric of the left. Completely co-opted it.
I've seen a lot of that, not from Bannon, but
so that you got these idiots like Jimmy Dore, even Max Blumenthal, who used to be a rather fine investigative reporter until he had a baby or something.
Let's not shit on Max. He's great.
Oh, come on. Yeah, he's not doing any reporting anymore. But they're using these lines that basically come out of Bannon's mouth. They're talking Bannon talk.
Ben, what are your thoughts? Because I have some thoughts, but if you want to...
let me introduce, let's say U.S. involvement is a given as a yes. As to the degree, we don't know. But I'd like to emphasize how this works. Carlo introduced one aspect, which was religion. Basically, the U.S. moves into a place, it seeks division. What are the differences between the population? I'd like to introduce two more. And those are, one is race and the other is class. Class is the most important to us communists. But race, you would know more about. In Hungary, there's just a tiny Roma minority. So we have a little microcosm of that, but it's really America that knows the most about race. But if you've watched the recent Miss Universe pageants, basically all the people who won the things were what I would call the caramel brown, with beautiful women, but the caramel brown. If you go into Latin America, into places like Brasilia, the high society in the cafes, and also the military leaders and their children and all of that, those are the caramel people. They're not the dark black Brazilians. So that's a major difference. But that's just race is emphasized by external forces, but that is class as well. They don't live in the barrios, They are the the comprador class, because Bolsonaro was in, you get your nice little salary here, you get your cut there, and you're going to live this comfortable life. And that part of society, I can imagine, with minimal foreign meddling, or with some, or with huge, I think they would be angry enough at Lula's return, because Lula stands for the poor, the people in poverty, the indigenous, the black folks, which would make someone with the evangelical and with the class considerations of a very comfortable lifestyle properly angry. So that's, again, I go back, I guess not gray now, but brown to me, not black and white, that's for sure. That's what I would say. Over to you, Billy Bob.
Well, yeah, so I found Carlo's metaphors relating to DeSantis as Hitler and Trump to Mussolini as a little confusing. I have a very straightforward conceptual framework, right? So this is a class dictatorship is in the West. It's headquartered in the United States. The United States is governed by a capitalist class dictatorship. The capitalist class dictatorship itself is comprised of innumerable different factions and interests, and they're always fighting and competing for each other. And then Trump represented a minority faction within the ruling capitalist class establishment. There was a majority consensus that they didn't want Trump. They don't like Trump. They don't want to allow Trump to become empowered and to have control over our foreign policy and things like that. So there was an agenda. There was a consensus. There was a ruling class majority agenda that involved dealing with Russia, dealing with China, and they
DPRK. Don't forget, he shook the hands of Kim Jong-un.
Right. They didn't want Trump. They weren't happy with Trump getting in there and messing up their plans and messing up their talking points on the media and all this kind of stuff. So Trump and Bannon. They have their backers. They have their billionaire backers within the ruling class, but it's a minority. And and I think that's where Bolsonaro messed up, because he ingratiated himself too much with Trump. He was seen too much as an ally of Trump. And because Trump is now, despised by the ruling establishment consensus by the majority of the ruling class. That's why he didn't get the support that he would maybe otherwise have received. And DeSantis represents the establishment's attempt, the consensus, their attempt.
Oh,
we lost Billy Bob.
We have a bit of a freeze, an unfortunate frame as well.
Let me jump in then.
So I just think DeSantis is the establishment-friendly Trump that they're hoping to utilize to corral all of Trump's supporters into supporting DeSantis, because DeSantis can be worked with. Trump is too much of a
too hot.
Okay, that's my assessment. What do you think, Carlo?
I agree with that. DeSantis can be worked with. I definitely agree with that. And there are people far more powerful than DeSantis that are anxious to put him in power, because he will have no more power than any other U.S. president. Maybe Roosevelt had a little bit. Lincoln, he got rid of habeas corpus, so that was a power move. But there are exceptions. But let's go back to Harry Truman. Okay, first I want to say Bannon has had no trouble abandoning Trump. He's thrown Trump under the bus. He's totally DeSantis now. He knows what side his bread is buttered on. But let's go back to Truman. People go on about what a great president Truman was. Truman was an idiot. I mean, you want to talk about a haberdasher in the right place at the wrong time, or right out. Truman was led around on a leash by a man named Jimmy Burns, who served several positions in the Truman administration. And Jimmy Burns was instrumental. I've read the documents. The documents are online. The meetings they had about whether to use the atomic bombs. Truman's never involved. He's too stupid to be involved. Oppenheimer made a very famous statement. After Truman retired from the presidency, it was Oppenheimer's duty to go to Truman and keep him up to date on nuclear weapons and nuclear developments in science. And he just I don't know what the quote was, but it was biting. He said, "This guy's a total fool." Presidents, by and large, are figureheads. They're total fools.
You're telling me Joe Biden doesn't make his decisions himself?
Only like what he wants on his oatmeal, and or where he left his teeth, But it's just DeSantis is the perfect puppet. He's the perfect puppet, and I'll tell you what he's done already to African American people is heinous. He's denying them the vote systematically. I mean, he's done it in Florida, and he's working with Alec and what's left of the Koch brothers that haven't died of cancer, to make sure that African Americans do not have the vote. Do not have the vote because of the way they vote. Obviously, they vote mostly Democrat, and then they're denied anything. Democrats don't do shit for them.
Still,
and I'm domestically, I'm afraid of DeSantis in that regard, because we just talked about the way the CIA loved their Nazis, the way the U.S. State Department, Allen Dulles, the John Foster Dulles, Prescott Bush, you name them, they love their Nazis, and I'm afraid that could come back, and with appropriate with some amendation. I don't think the vast majority of the Jewish population would stand for that, for one, to being crystal knocked again for 1 second. I don't believe they would. At least I hope they wouldn't. And I would be behind them. I'd crawl to prevent that from happening. But I lost my train of thought, because that's a very emotional thing for me.
I'll jump in because sorry.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
I want to just mention that Sergei Lavrov's yesterday's statement about the final solution against Russians, the new crusade, the people who are most upset were the European Jewish Council, like how dare Lavrov. But that was just a tidbit. But since I'm surrounded with free Americans, and I really don't understand this story. I'd love to get your takes about the papers, the what do you call it? Secret papers that were found near the Corvette, in Biden's garage, in 3 places, 5 places, like basically the Trump thing all again. So what is going on by your account? Because I'm sitting way outside and I don't know what's happening.
Well, I can tell you an anecdote. I'm sorry, Billy Bob. You want to jump in?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's speculation. It's just speculation, and you've probably read all the speculation I've read, Ben.
Let's do that.
It's leverage. They found these things months ago, and the only reason it's surfacing is to have leverage over Biden, and it could be leverage to try and get him not to run again, because the Democrats have to find someone else, because he's not gonna, be their person in 2024. It could be leverage to get him to commit, Abrams tanks or U.S. troops, to escalate bigger in Ukraine. But honestly, I have no idea specifically what what is going on behind the scenes. But it does seem very suspicious that these things were discovered, and then the media found out about it. Carlo, that's all I want to say.
I'm a used and rare book dealer by trade, and I go on book buys around the Washington area. I live currently a half mile outside the district line. I was raised inside the district line.
Belly of the beast.
I go to buy people's books who were in the government, and they all have classified documents laying around. I go through boxes of books, and I go, well, is this declassified or not? And they don't know. It says classified on it. I had a customer who was so proud of his Russian analysis that he would bring me his papers, and he claimed, well, don't worry, these are declassified. But they were marked classified. I had no, and I would read them, and we would talk about them, and he bought like books by Kirkpatrick and people like that. And so what's happening here with not only Trump, not only Biden, but with Trump too, is they're making a mountain out of a fucking molehill, because those documents are all over the place. You go to the book sale.
They find them when it's convenient. The question is, what are they going to do with it now? I thought he was out, and maybe we were going to have negative charisma Kamala, which would be bad news for the entire world. But
they don't want her either.
They don't want her either. So.
They don't want her at all.
No.
But
they, by the way,
hands up in the air is exactly where I am.
Who is the they that we're talking about? I'm always curious.
I wanted to touch on that. So Ben, you brought up a very important point, which is our leaders are puppets. They're figureheads. They don't have actual power, and they don't actually decide things, right? So it's different in China. In China, you have leadership. In Russia, you have leadership. You have Lavrov, you've got Putin. I mean, these are big thinkers. These are leaders, and they decide things, and they deal with real life. Our joke of a political theater, that we don't have leaders. We don't know what leaders are. And our media does its very best to pretend that our leaders are leaders too. And they try and, make Putin and Xi look like, morons or villains, really.
Villains,
but things are decided, in a much different way in this country. So personally, I see it as, there's an organization, there's a structure where you have think tanks, and it's all billionaire funded, and it's all people thinking about what is in the best interest of the ruling class minority that, accounts for, more wealth than the poorest 90%. So it's the rich people that, have a set of interests, and then, they pay thinkers and this huge this think tank organization. You've got the intelligence community, which essentially is just, all about maintaining the status quo and making sure that the power of our wealthy elites is maintained and perpetuated. So it's, Biden is not making policy.
I know it's fashionable
probably
since
not making policy.
since
They're
Trump.
just figureheads, you know.
Yeah, it's
So
fashionable
that's an
since.
important thing, I think.
Look at that. It's fashionable since Trump to say the deep state. It's a fashionable phrase, but yeah, I mean, one of these guys said we have 5 ways till Sunday to screw over sitting presidents. That's that has to be considered. The intelligence.
So that's right. That's right. That's who said that? I forget. That was an interesting quote from a few years ago.
Yeah, I'm blanking too.
I think it was Pompeo.
Ooh,
I'm not sure.
It could have been the CIA director.
We lie, we stole.
No,
we
that's
cheated.
not right. That's not
Pompeo.
right. I'll take that back.
But it was also, I mean, the JFK treatment. I mean, there's, worst comes to worst, they just give them lead poisoning. So these people are manipulated. When they become inconvenient, they're dealt with. And I think that's what we're seeing here with these discovered documents.
Which we can talk about in the context of Frank Church too. This whole thing, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tom Massey and I can't remember who else.
Your heroes.
Yeah, my heroes. They're going to do a Church too. Did they realize that the CIA killed Church One, killed Frank Church? I mean,
dangerous.
It's not only they're not going to. They're just doing it for partisan right. leverage. They're not going to do what Frank Church.
It's a mock committee. Committee.
But Chuck Schumer said 5 ways from Sunday to deal with the president. Yeah. So we're gonna, I think, we're gonna reschedule Matt. We would have liked to have him. He could have definitely been a contributor, but there was some issues with the platform, so we'll definitely invite him back on a different week.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 2.5 minutes till we close.
Oh, all right.
But that comment keeps coming up for some odd reason. I believe we have somebody sort of distracting.
Well, I guess I can't.
Okay, so 2.5 minutes. I was just going to say about this spook community, it was very interesting to see, even before Davos this week, the main spectacle in the world. The guests got leaked, and I think the head of MI5, CIA, and the National Intelligence Director were present, which was weird to me because it's a lobbying organization of 1,000 companies, and suddenly there's 3 big heads of intelligence services present. Just as a last tidbit to make people think about these things.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to the discussion of race. I mean, in New Orleans and much of the South, parts of Florida, especially New Orleans, though, they used to have a couple of dozen grades of color. You were graded. Your status in society was determined by how much color you had in your skin, and the more color you had, the less your status. And so race is very, very much ingrained in this culture, and we aren't even close, not even close to equal rights. And in
2022.
Yeah, I feel
3 that
African Americans in particular are in grave danger in this country. So that I just wanted to put my 2 cents in with that.
Oh,
no matter how many celebrities they have. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Carlo. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Billy Bob, for being on the program. You guys viewing, if you're not subscribed to the channel, now's the time to hit that subscribe button. Bang. Then you'll be updated when we come on, and make sure to hit that notification of when we go live so you will know. And next time we will have Matt on the show. We'll hopefully have that announcement pretty soon. We'll get him on here another time at another date. So thanks for watching the Foreign Policy Review, and remember to do some reading and research of your own. Don't take our word for it. There's a lot online, a lot of books out there, tons of them being produced every day. So do some reading and get some research. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York PARROT, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York PARROT, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the websites they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our news site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York PARROT is born to